The gavel falls in Burleigh County Family Court. Judge Cora Whitford reads the final line. The house, half the accounts, the second mortgage on the hangar, all of it goes to Brielle Ashworth. Knox Beaumont stands without a word. He walks the long aisle alone, pushes through the double doors, down the marble hallway, out into the cold November light of the main courthouse steps. There, on the plaza below, with rotors already turning, sits a black Sikorsky helicopter, Beaumont Aerospace painted across the tail. Behind him, Brielle reaches the threshold. Her smile dies. Knox keeps walking, never looks back. 6 hours earlier, the smell of oatmeal in a small kitchen outside Bismarck. Knox at the counter in a flannel shirt, stirring a pot. Hattie at the table in her school clothes, swinging her feet, telling him about a science project involving a paper plate and the solar system. He tied the small ribbon in her hair. She had her mother's hair. He smiled for her benefit. He drove her to school. He kissed the top of her head at the curb. He waved until she went through the doors. In the car, he called Greer. 11:30, pick her up. Bring her to the courthouse plaza at noon. Greer paused on the other end of the line. You're really doing it today? The board knows. Margot flew in last night. Today is today. Knox drove the old Ford to the courthouse alone. He parked 3 blocks away. He walked. Brielle stepped out of a Lexus borrowed from Cyrus. A faux fur coat, red lipstick. Cyrus opened the door for her, the gesture of a lover, not an attorney. They did not see Knox enter through the side door. The hallway was cold. Marble columns, the smell of old paper. Knox sat at the respondent's table, alone. His attorney sat beside him, briefcase closed, instructions clear. Do not fight the asset division. Fight only for the child. Greer was not in the gallery. Greer was at Hattie's school. The gallery held a few local reporters and 2 retirees with nothing better to do on a November morning. Judge Cora Whitford entered. The court rose. First impression, composed, steady, gray-blue eyes that did not need to be raised to keep order. She greeted both sides with perfect neutrality. She took her seat. Brielle delivered testimony Cyrus had sharpened over weeks. Joint assets, shared sacrifice, a marriage Knox had supposedly destroyed through emotional unavailability. Knox did not contest a word. Cora frowned briefly. Mr. Beaumont, would you like to challenge any of the asset valuations? No, Your Honor. A pause. She made a note. Something was off. She could feel it in her sternum. She had no legal ground to stop the proceeding, the custody portion. Knox pushed back for the first time all morning. His attorney entered records, teacher statements, the pediatrician's notes, a calendar of Brielle's absences from Hattie's school events over the last 18 months. Brielle's mouth tightened. Cyrus put a hand on her arm. Restrain yourself. Cora ruled. Brielle would receive the house, half of the joint accounts, the second mortgage on the hangar. Knox would retain primary physical custody of Hattie. She read the order aloud in a clean, low voice. Her eyes flicked to Knox once. Something in his stillness troubled her. He stood. He inclined his head. Thank you, Your Honor. It was not a courtroom phrase. It was something else. She did not have time to place it. He walked down the aisle alone. The double doors opened. His footsteps faded. Cora found herself still watching the empty aisle. She did not understand why she was sitting there watching a man who had just lost almost everything. The bailiff called the next case. She gathered the file. She stood. Out the long hallway, Knox passed the marble columns. The morning light came through the tall windows in pale rectangles. He had walked this hallway in his mind for 6 months. He walked it now without rehearsal. At the courthouse's main entrance, he pushed the heavy oak doors. November light, cold air. He stepped into the day. Knox walked down the granite steps. On the plaza below, the black Sikorsky had been on the ground for 15 minutes. It had set down quietly while Cyrus was still preening at the bench. Its rotors turned in a slow idle. 3 people stepped forward to meet him. Margot Halsey, 62, board chair of Beaumont Aerospace, charcoal suit, the kind of woman who had not raised her voice in 20 years and had not needed to. Beside her, Amon Stratton, head of corporate security, former pararescue, the only person in the company taller than the helicopter door. And Theodora Brennan, chief counsel, holding a black folder against her chest. Margot spoke first, just loud enough to clear the rotor wash. 7 years, Knox. The Phoenix line is dying without you. Eve would want you back. Today is the day. Knox gave one short nod. From the corner of the plaza, by an old pickup, Greer appeared. Hattie's hand was in his. She wore the small pink coat Knox had zipped on her that morning. She saw her father. She let go of Greer's hand. She ran. Knox knelt on the whetstone. He opened his arms. She landed in them. He lifted her against his shoulder. Daddy, are we going on the plane? Yes, baby. We're going on the plane. She buried her face in his collar. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened. Brielle stepped out with Cyrus. She saw the helicopter. She saw the logo painted across the tail. She saw the woman in the charcoal suit. She saw Hattie in Knox's arms. Her brain stopped. Cyrus turned the color of cement. He recognized the name before she did. Beaumont Aerospace. Beaumont. Knox Beaumont. His own father had tried to do business with that family 10 years earlier and had been politely shown the door. Cyrus had just helped his lover sue a man worth $11 billion. Margot turned toward Brielle. Her voice did not rise. Mrs. Ashcourt, you should call a different attorney. Our forensic accountants land in the morning. She turned to Cyrus. Mr. Galt, the file on you will be on the bureau's desk by next week. At the top of the steps, Cora Whitford had come out of chambers to leave for the day, briefcase over her shoulder. She stopped. She saw the helicopter. She saw the logo. She heard what Margot said. The pieces fell into place all at once. Knox stood with Hattie in his arms. He walked toward the helicopter. He passed near the bottom of the granite steps where Cora stood. He paused for half a second. He raised his eyes to hers. Thank you for being fair, Judge. He kept walking. She watched him board the helicopter with his daughter. The rotor wash lifted her hair. By the old pickup, Greer stood with his hands in his coat pockets and smiled the first true smile he had worn in 7 years. The Sikorsky lifted off. Brielle and Cyrus stood in the downdraft, hair flying, no one moving, no one speaking. Cora pressed her hand against the cold stone of the railing and did not understand why her heart was hammering against her ribs. The helicopter banked east toward Minneapolis. The sound trailed away across Bismarck. Inside Knox's coat pocket, his phone buzzed once. A message from the board. When you are ready. He looked at the small dark head pressed against his chest. He realized, ready. Down on the plaza, Brielle finally found her voice. It came out small and broken. Beaumont? Cyrus did not answer her. He was already walking away, fast, toward a car he could no longer afford to be seen in. By dawn, the Bismarck Tribune was on every porch, front page, above the fold, local mechanic was aerospace hero all alone. Cora read it in her chambers. The coffee in her hand had gone cold while she stared at the photograph. Her colleagues moved past her doorway with their eyes lowered. She had ruled in the case the day before. She had ruled correctly on the record she had been given. There was no judicial fault, but the air in the courthouse was different now. Everyone knew. Everyone knew that they had not known. By 10 o'clock, Cyrus Gold filed a motion to vacate based on concealment of assets. Cora read his brief twice. Then she pulled Knox's discovery filings from the original case. He had disclosed everything the law required. The personal accounts, the house, the truck, the hangars for his mortgage. The Beaumont equity sat in a premarital trust that produced no income to him. He had been refusing dividends for 7 years. And under North Dakota family law, it did not have to be listed. He had not lied to her court. He had simply declined to correct people who were lying to themselves. Cora denied the motion in 11 minutes. In Minneapolis, Knox was at Beaumont headquarters with Hattie. Margot walked the child through the engineering floor. Hattie's eyes went very wide at a 1/3 scale model of the rescue helicopter that her family company built for the Coast Guard. She touched the rotor with a single finger and looked up at Margot with something like awe. In the boardroom, Knox set his conditions. He would stay in Bismarck near Hattie's school. He would come to Minneapolis when the technical work required it and not before. He would not give interviews. He would not sit for portraits. He would not appear at industry events for at least 1 year. His name would not go on the masthead. The board accepted. Margot watched him sign the agreement. Eve would be proud. He did not answer her. He folded the page in half. Across town in Bismarck, Cyrus Galt visited an old classmate at another firm and tried to fish for information. The conversation was brief. The classmate offered nothing. He understood the shape of what was coming. He did not want to be in the photographs. The truth, which the recordings would later confirm, was that Cyrus had not simply been an attorney for Brielle. He had engineered the marriage. He had been her lover for 2 years before Knox ever met her. He had spotted an old MIT class photograph on the wall of Knox's hangar and guessed at the rest. He had assumed Knox was a disowned son. He had assumed wrong. That afternoon, a second motion crossed Cora's desk. This one was filed by Theodora Brennan on behalf of Knox. It was not a defense. It was an attack. It requested an investigation into marital fraud committed by Brielle Ashcourt and her co-conspirator Cyrus Galt. Attached, a schedule of forged signatures on 6 loan applications, more than $1.8 million transferred out of joint accounts on Knox's forged signature, and the falsified documents that had moved the hangar's second mortgage into Brielle's name. Cora read it 3 times. She set a hearing in 10 days. That night, at her kitchen table, alone, she thought of his half-second pause at the foot of the granite steps. Thank you for being fair, Judge. Not sarcasm. Not theater. A simple thing. She did not sleep well. 10 days later, Knox came back to Bismarck with Hattie. The town looked at him differently now, half in admiration, half in embarrassment at having underestimated him. He wore the same flannel he had worn before. He drove the same old Ford. Greer kept his silence, but his eyes carried something. Hattie went to school that morning as she always did. Knox went to the hearing alone. In chambers before the proceeding, Cora met briefly with both attorneys. Cyrus was sweating through his shirt. Theodora Brennan was precise down to the comma. Cora kept her voice level. She advised both sides on the day's scope. She did not look at the door when she said Knox's name. The hearing opened. Theodora laid out the evidence in a low, careful voice. 6 forged signatures across loan applications dating back to the 2nd year of the marriage, a money trail leading from joint accounts into a separate account in Brielle's maiden name, a handwriting comparison from a certified examiner. Knox's actual signature on the left, the forgery on the right with the differences marked in red. Cyrus tried to push back. He argued chain of custody. He argued the certified examiner had been retained by Beaumont counsel. He argued. Brielle began to cry. Quietly at first, then less quietly. Cora kept order. She did not look at Knox more than the proceedings required, but there was one moment when Knox was asked to confirm that the signature on the right was not his when their eyes met for half a beat longer than necessary. She closed her notebook. She continued, at the lunch break, Knox sat alone in the courthouse cafeteria. He ate nothing for a long time. He opened his phone and sent Greer a single line, "How is she?" Greer sent back a photograph, Hattie in art class, paint on her cheek, beaming. Knox laughed once, almost without sound. He ate after that. Cora ate a sandwich alone in her chambers. She caught herself thinking of how Knox had knelt on the whetstone of the plaza 10 days earlier. The shape of him bending down, the way Hattie had buried her face in his shoulder. She closed the file in front of her. She went back to work. The hearing reconvened. Cora delivered her ruling without flourish. There was probable cause to believe that fraud had occurred in the marriage. The matter would be referred to the district attorney for criminal review. Knox's assets, the house, the joint accounts, the second mortgage were restored pending the outcome of the investigation. Brielle wept harder. Cyrus had left the room before the ruling was complete. That night, Knox stood in the gravel lot of his hangar and looked up at the cold Bismarck stars. Greer brought out 2 bottles of beer and set one in his hand. Neither man spoke. The radio in the hangar played something low and old. The wind off the prairie moved through the metal struts. A few miles east, Cora stood at her kitchen window. She held a glass of water. She did not understand why her hand had trembled when she had signed the order. She had signed thousands of orders in her career. None had ever made her hand tremble. She put the glass down. She stood there for a long time. The same Bismarck sky stretched over both their roofs, and neither of them knew it. The local papers praised her. The Tribune ran an editorial under the headline, "A Judge Who Listens." Her name began to appear on the rumored shortlist for the 8th Circuit. She declined to comment. Brielle, now facing criminal charges, came to the hangar one late evening. Greer was near the open bay door, pretending to organize a shelf of tools, watching without watching. She wore a coat that had once been expensive. Her makeup was uneven. Her hands shook. She stood in the doorway and waited until Knox looked at her. Was any of it real, Knox? He looked at her for a long moment. He did not raise his voice. He never did. From me? Yes. From you? No. She started to cry. He did not move toward her. He did not offer her water. He stood with a wrench in his hand and waited until she walked back to the car she had borrowed. He locked the bay door behind her. He drove home. Hattie was in pajamas with cat prints on the bottoms. She had drawn a picture of an airplane and she presented it to him with a small formal bow. He thanked her. He put it on a side table by the lamp where he kept the things she had made. At bedtime, he sat on the edge of her mattress. Daddy? Yeah, baby. Why didn't you tell anyone you were rich? He thought about how to answer. He thought about Eve, who had spent the last 3 months of her life writing him letters. And one of those letters had said, times, "Do not let this change her because Mama and I made a promise to each other. We didn't want it to change you." Hattie considered this. Judge Cora is a good person, right, Daddy? He paused. Why do you ask? You said she listened to you. Mama always said the most important grown-ups are the ones who listen. Knox did not answer for a moment. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Yes, she listened. He kissed her forehead. He turned off the small lamp. He sat in the chair by her bed long after she fell asleep. For the first time in 7 years, he thought of Eve without his chest closing around the thought. It was something like gratitude. A few miles away, Cora was on the phone with her sister. The two of them had not lived in the same state in 11 years, but they spoke twice a week. Did you see the paper? Her sister said. Everyone is talking about you, about the Beaumont case. Cora pushed it aside. You're thinking about someone. Cora did not answer that. Her sister waited. Cora, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She did not. She said she was tired and that they would talk Sunday. She hung up. She stood at the kitchen window. She looked out at the same dark Bismarck sky that Knox was looking at from his daughter's bedroom chair. Two windows facing the same horizon, 6 miles apart. Neither of them knew the other was awake. She drank a glass of water. She washed it. She set it upside down on the rack. She went to bed and did not sleep for almost an hour. 3 weeks. The district attorney's investigation moved slowly. Cyrus Galt had political shelter. His father was a state senator with friends in the prosecutor's office. And friends in those positions could slow the gears of any small county machine. Knox did not push. He believed in process even when process was inconvenient. Cora did not interfere. She no longer sat on the case. On a Tuesday morning, Greer Dalton walked into the office of the district attorney. He wore the flannel he always wore. He carried a manila envelope under his arm. He had not slept much. He had been deciding the timing of this for 6 months. The DA looked up from his desk. "Mr. Dalton, you'll want to hear what I have." 6 months before the divorce filing, Brielle had come to the hangar one afternoon while Knox was at Hattie's school. She had asked Greer to help her quietly sell an old Beaumont test prototype Knox kept in a hangar bay under tarpaulin. She had told Greer there were collectors. She had told him there would be a finder's fee. Greer had refused. He had said it pleasantly. He had also stopped sleeping that night. The next day he had bought a small voice recorder from a hardware store in Mandan and hidden it in his toolbox. What he turned in now, in the manila envelope, was 14 hours of audio. On the recordings, Brielle and Cyrus could be heard at the hangar in the back office on 3 separate occasions planning. They discussed a fallback strategy. If Knox would not agree to merge the hangar with a Galt family entity, they named 3 local officials they had bribed or believed they could bribe. They named a contact at the FAA. They discussed exporting aircraft components in violation of federal controls. They named amounts. They named dates. They named ports. The case jumped venue from a county family fraud case to a federal RICO investigation with parallel charges for violation of aerospace export control law. The Bureau took primary. The file moved to Fargo. Knox heard about it from Theodora. He stood in the kitchen for a long time without moving. Then he drove to the hangar. He found Greer in the back wiping a wrench with an oily rag. Greer did not look up when Knox came in. "You held this for 6 months. You had enough on your plate." "Greer, I was waiting for the right time." Knox put his hand on the older man's shoulder. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The afternoon light came through the hangar door in a long flat slab. The wrench in Greer's hand caught it. In the federal courthouse in Fargo, 2 weeks later, the witness list for the prosecution of Cyrus Galt was finalized. Knox Beaumont, Greer Dalton, Theodora Brennan, and because of certain motions she had ruled on before her bench, Judge Cora Woodford. She would testify as a witness, not as a judge. She had ruled on the family case. She could not also adjudicate the criminal one. She accepted the subpoena. She did not object. The night before she drove to Fargo, she sat in her car in the parking lot of the supermarket for 15 minutes without turning the key. She told herself she was going as a witness, nothing more, nothing less. She did not believe herself. She started the car. She drove home through the dark streets of Bismarck. The same dark streets she had driven for 9 years. Different night. The federal courthouse in Fargo. 3 days of trial. Knox testified calm, precise, undramatic. He named what he had been asked to name. He did not editorialize. He did not look at Braille. Cora testified professional, brief. She described the motions before her bench. She left when she was dismissed. By protocol, they were kept apart. Knox had brought Hattie with him to Fargo. He had not wanted to be away from her this week. A Beaumont nanny watched her at the hotel during the hearings. In the evenings, he read to her in the hotel bed until she fell asleep. He drank cold coffee in a chair by the window and looked out at the lit cathedral across the river. On the third afternoon, they happened to leave the courthouse at the same time. The press had set up at Cora's hotel. They had set up at Knox's hotel as well. But he had a private entrance, a security team, and a black SUV with tinted glass. Cora did not. Knox stopped her at the side exit. "My team can take you around the back." She hesitated. He watched her hesitate. "It's a ride," he said, "nothing more." She nodded once. She climbed into the back of the SUV. The trip was 20 minutes. They spoke about nothing in particular. The weather. A book she had been reading on Romanesque architecture. The age difference between Hattie and her own school-age nephew. Knox did not look at Cora's face when she spoke. He looked at his hands. She did not look at him, either. She looked at the buildings going past. Halfway through, Hattie picked up from the hotel nanny, so she could ride back with her father, fell asleep in the booster seat between them. Her head, in the small motion the SUV made over a railroad crossing, tipped sideways and rested on Cora's shoulder. Cora went still. 3 seconds. Then she shifted her arms so that the child could lie more comfortably. She did not look at Knox. He did not look at her. He did watch without watching the way her hands settled on the seat between them, palm down, fingers spread, careful not to wake the child. They did not speak for the rest of the ride. At Cora's hotel, she opened the door. "Good night, Mr. Beaumont." "Knox." Just Knox. She did not repeat it. She nodded. She went inside. Knox waited until the lobby door had closed behind her before he told the driver to go. A week later, the federal jury returned. Cyrus Galt was convicted on multiple counts. Fraud, bribery, violation of federal export controls. Briel accepted a plea deal, probation, restitution, mandatory testimony. The Bismarck community had now genuinely turned. People who had been in Knox's high school class began to admit to each other and then aloud that they had never really known him. Knox made his decision. He would step out of the shadow but on his own terms. He merged Beaumont's small Bismarck operations into the existing hangar property and announced the expansion as a regional engineering hub. Jobs for 200 locals. He stayed in Bismarck for Hattie. Cora was formally offered the 8th Circuit seat. She did not answer immediately. She told her sister she might be too attached to Bismarck. Knox attended a small community ribbon cutting that fall. His first public appearance, he saw Cora across the room. Neither of them approached the other, but for the entire evening, each of them knew where the other was standing. Knox left first. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling early. He sat in the Ford for 10 extra minutes before he started the engine. He did not ask himself why. Hattie's elementary school held its winter program in the gymnasium on a Thursday night. Cora's nephew, 8 years old, was in the same school. Cora drove him there, paid the modest entrance, sat on a folding chair on the east side of the gym. Knox and Hattie sat on the west side. Neither one knew until the lights dimmed that the other was in the room. The children sang 2 songs. They did a short play about winter animals. Hattie was a small rabbit. She forgot her one line and improvised it with serious adult dignity, and the audience laughed. Knox laughed, too. From across the gymnasium, in the dim light, Cora saw him laugh. The sight of it caught in her chest in a way she did not want to name. After the show in the bright crowded lobby, Hattie spotted her in the crowd and broke loose from her father's hand. "You are the judge with the nice voice." Cora knelt without thinking. She was wearing pearls. She was wearing court shoes. She knelt to a 7-year-old in a rabbit costume on a school linoleum floor and surprised herself by how easy it was. "Hello, Hattie. You came to my school. My nephew goes here, too." "Is he the one who was the moose?" He was. Knox came up slowly, hands in his coat pockets. He did not crowd them. "Judge Whitford, Mr. Beaumont." A short, polite, careful exchange. The crowd around them moved. Other parents pretended not to see who was speaking with whom. "Would you want to get a coffee?" he said. "Sometime." With Hattie. She hesitated. She thought of the optics. She thought of the case files still open in the appellate division. She thought of the reputation she had spent 15 years building. "When the appeal is fully closed?" He nodded. He did not push. He gathered Hattie's hand. They left. She watched the back of his coat through the doors until it was gone. 3 weeks later, the appeal closed. Cyrus's conviction stood. Bro's sentence was confirmed. The Beaumont file was finished. Knox sent a handwritten note, not a text, not an email. He and Hattie would be at the diner on Memorial Avenue on Saturday at 9 o'clock. No pressure. She came. Saturday morning at the diner. 3 at a booth. Hattie did most of the talking. She described, in elaborate detail, an imaginary rabbit named Mr. Periwinkle who lived in her closet and ate carrot greens and apparently held strong opinions about politics. Cora laughed. Truly laughed out loud. Eyes crinkling. Hand briefly over her mouth for the first time in the entire arc of these months. Knox said little. His eyes were warm. From a booth in the corner, Greer drank black coffee and watched. When the three of them rose to leave, he nodded to Knox once across the room. Outside the diner, snow fell on Cora's wool coat. Hattie took Cora's hand on the sidewalk as if she had always done so. Knox walked behind them, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. Cora felt something in her chest she had not allowed herself to feel for many years. She did not name it. She did not have to. The snow kept coming down on Memorial Avenue, soft and slow. And she walked beside the little girl who held her hand. April came to Bismarck. The snow began to go. The ice on the river broke up in great white sheets. The hangar expansion broke ground at the back of the lot, behind the original building Knox had refused to tear down. He hired 20 more local workers. He still wore the same flannel he had worn the first time Cora had seen him in her courtroom. Hattie invited Cora over for dinner on a Sunday. The invitation was entirely the child's idea. She had announced it at the diner on a paper napkin in crayon, on which she had written "Dinner Sunday at 5 o'clock you must come," and signed her name underneath in the careful loops of a 7-year-old. Knox cooked. He was not a good cook. He had a recipe printed off the internet on the counter, splattered with olive oil, and a pan of cream sauce on the stove that he had been ignoring for 90 seconds too long. The bottom of the pan had turned a color Cora had not seen on food before. "Oh," Cora said, "it's fine." "It is not fine, Knox." He looked at the pan. He turned off the burner. They ate around the burned parts. Hattie pronounced the pasta delicious, because Hattie pronounced everything delicious at her father's table. After dinner, they watched a movie. One Eve had loved, Knox said, almost in passing. Cora did not comment on his ease in mentioning Eve's name. Hattie fell asleep on the couch between them, head against her father's arm, feet warm against Cora's leg through the wool of her trousers. Knox carried his daughter upstairs. He came back down. Cora was at the window in the dim front room looking out at the city lights. He stood behind her. He did not touch her. They watched the night together. "They offered me the federal seat," she said quietly. "The 8th Circuit. I'd be based in St. Louis." A pause. "I told them I needed time." Knox did not say times don't go. He said, "Whatever you decide, I'll respect." She turned. She looked at him for a long time. "I think I'm going to turn it down." He did not ask why. He understood. They did not kiss. He walked her to the door. He held her coat for her without making it a gesture. He opened the door. The April air came in, soft and damp. "Good night, Cora." It was the first time he had used her first name aloud to her face with no title attached. "Good night, Knox." She drove home in the spring darkness. The windshield fogged near the corner of 6th and Front. At the red light, she put her hand on the steering wheel and noticed it was trembling. She laughed at herself in the rearview mirror. 37 years old and shaking because of a man who had not said one decisive thing. She did not call her sister that night. She did not call anyone. She let herself into her apartment. She poured a glass of water. She stood at her own kitchen window for a long time and watched the street light outside. The next morning, she walked into the courthouse and filed her decline of the 8th Circuit nomination. 3 weeks after that, she filed her resignation from the bench. She gave no public reason. She did not need to. 1 year, almost to the day, after the helicopter had set down on the courthouse plaza, the opening of the Beaumont-Bismarck Engineering Campus, the local press came. The lieutenant governor came. The mayor came. The ceremony was small by Beaumont standards. Knox had asked for it that way. He gave a short speech. He had written it himself in pencil on a yellow legal pad and rewritten it twice. He spoke about Eve for the first time in public. He said her name. He said she had been the woman who had made him want to disappear. Because what they had built together had been the only thing he had ever wanted to protect. And after she was gone, he had wanted Hattie to grow up in the size of the world Eve had built and not in the size of the world he had inherited. He said that promise had carried him for 7 years and that he was not breaking it now. He was, with luck, finishing it. He thanked Greer, who sat in the front row going slowly red. He thanked the community of Bismarck for letting him be ordinary first. He did not mention Cora, but she was there. Back row on the aisle. After the speech, at the reception, Hattie wore a small navy dress and her hair in 2 careful braids. She stood beside Cora and held her hand. Cora, no longer Judge Whitford, simply Cora Whitford of the small civil rights firm 2 blocks off Main, held the child's hand back. Knox walked over with 2 paper cups of reception coffee. He handed one to Cora. The coffee was bad. They drank it anyway. Hattie was between them, holding the hand of each. The first snow of the season began to fall on the new campus. Earlier than the year before. Eve would have liked you, Knox said. I think I would have liked her, too. They stood quietly for a while. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was small. He did not kiss her. He did not need to. Hattie looked up at both of them. She smiled the way children smile when they understand more than the adults around them give them credit for understanding. The light from the new campus fell on the 3 of them. Across the parking area, the black Sikorsky sat at rest on its pad, lights low, rotors still. A year before it had been a weapon, now it was simply transportation. The world had not changed, what it meant inside their lives had. Knox put his coffee cup down on a low concrete planter. He looked at Cora. She looked back at him. Hattie kept hold of both their hands. There was no decisive moment. There never had been with him. There never would be. They stood in the falling snow until it gathered on Cora's coat and on the small ribbon in Hattie's hair, until Knox felt the cold on the back of his neck, until Greer caught his eye from across the lot and tipped his hat once and turned away toward the old pickup. Neither of them had been looking. Neither of them had planned this, but the snow kept falling and none of them moved.